Hello and welcome to Security Insecure, hosted by Johnny Seifert. This is the Celebrity Mental Health Podcast where I say it's okay to not be okay. And if you have the same mantra as me, then before we get to today's guest, please subscribe to Security Insecure whilst you're listening or watching. And at the end of the episode, leave a 5-star rating and a review. Now, let me tell you about my guest today. My guest today has single-handedly, over the past 5 years, helped you understand in a bite-sized way the true atrocities of the Holocaust. Through her books, starting with The Tattooist of Auschwitz and her remarkable storytelling, she has made the horrific events of World War I and II accessible to understand so that you can be educated and help spread the word that this can never happen again. 3 books and her own memoir later, she is back with her new book, Sisters Under the Rising Sun, focusing this time on the Australian nurses who ended up in the Japanese War in the 1940s. So using her favourite song, 100 Days Rise Up, as a soundtrack to this interview, I'm delighted to rise up my knowledge and welcome back to Security Insecure. It's Heather Morris. Hello, Heather.
Hello, darling. It's so lovely to be talking again.
I met you and I cried on you and you stuck with me so much. And you are one of the people that I've met that I've never forgotten. And to that extent, I have a picture of you on my walls that I never forget you. And you are, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but you're over there. You sit by my desk every day and I always look up to you. And then on my phone, there you go, on my phone, you are right over there. So that I always see you, because what you did for me when it came to educating about the Holocaust, and for those watching or listening, I've been to Auschwitz twice. I'm Jewish. I've made documentaries on it. I've interviewed about 12 survivors. I've listened to many survivors over the years. And your book, The Tattooist of Auschwitz, was the book that I went, okay, I'm starting to understand what the people it went through at Auschwitz in the Holocaust in a bite-sized way that I could actually comprehend it. Because when you say 6 million Jewish people have died, it's very hard to understand what that is. But Tattooist of Auschwitz, Silke's Journey, The Three Sisters, you really just helped me. And I will be indebted to you forever, because I spread the word and I spoke about it with my friends and we were like, okay, we can see a very little glimpse of the picture. So first of all, I'm just going to say thank you.
Oh, sweetheart, I love meeting with you. I'm sorry we're not doing it in person. And thank you. Yeah, just the lucky bugger that got to meet Lally Sokolov and tell the story, not knowing any other way to tell it but in his words. And it then became the story that was relatable to you and to others. And you're just a lucky bugger here.
And also, in that book, The Tattooist of Auschwitz, amongst everything else, the one thing I always took away was the fact that there was a flower that he'd picked for Gita, his wife, in the concentration camp, and the fact they'd fell in love. And what's interesting, when we then come to Sisters Under the Rising Sun, is across all of it, and it's about Australian nurses who go into a Japanese war, there's another little bit which is all about the music concerts and the way that Beethoven is kind of the voice of the book. The fact that they had these concerts that Nora went to. And I thought, again, for your writing, it was just so special that, yes, this is absolutely horrific, but it wasn't completely bad 100% of the time. There was 1% where they could have laughed for a second, if that's fair to say, because I know, obviously, this is a very sensitive topic.
Well, they actually laughed quite a lot. The Aussie girls and the New Zealanders there, they're all about taking the mickey out of the Japanese. And they did it, obviously, and with the smile on their face or their heads bowed in deference, but what they were saying and not understood by the Japanese. They created a lot of laughter in that camp purely by their attitudes to them. Yes, the English women and the Dutch colonial women and the Dutch nuns were more constrained in how they behaved, but they certainly enjoyed the craziness and the whimsy that came from the Aussie and the New Zealanders that were there. They just added this other component to it. There was laughter. There was certainly immense joy, and that joy all came from the power of music.
Well, look, let's talk about it. Let's delve a little bit deeper into it, because for those that don't know you, you've taken a person who was associated with the war, and either you've spoken to them directly or through their ancestors, and then you've created a storyline which is based on their experiences, but this isn't exactly as it happened to them. Obviously, their memories, and there's only so many factual documents that are now left. So talk to me about the building blocks of this book to tell Nesta and Nora's stories, who are the main characters in the book.
I wasn't relying on memory, because the Australian nurses, they all made, and we found them buried deep in the bowels of the Australian War Museum, both written and oral testimonies within months of coming back to Australia. So their memories then, trust me, they were pretty fresh.
So how much thought are those notes though? When they're writing their testimony to go through 4 years and what they went through, how much did they I know that one of them went to court to, put the captain away, for 15 years. So how much did they actually write down and remember? Because that's a lot to condense into a piece of paper, basically.
Well, there was the written testimony, but in the case of Nesta, she had made a 2-hour audio, recording.
Right.
I got to hear in her own voice and in her own words her story. The interviewer doing it was woeful. I spent more time yelling at how angry I was at this interview was just blowing so many chances, but I still got enough. Now, the thing with Nora and her story, I was getting that from her 87-year-old daughter. So there I did have that time, history, and memory gap going on. But back in the 50s and the 60s, a couple of the nurses wrote their memoir. These books are long out of print, haven't been seen for decades. But in there, once again, their storylines were up to the date. They were clear, they were fresh. They hadn't forgotten anything about that treatment. And you talk about all the different storylines. The thing, folks, I want you to understand is why I have focused on Nesta and Nora and maybe a handful, up to 6 other women. This story actually belongs to 500 women and some 40 children. I couldn't have had all those characters in a book and have you follow it. And it's one of the things that I do feel bad about, and I'm going to have to find a way to come to terms with it, that I took incredible vignettes and incredible things that happened to other women and gave them to somebody else in my story. Every storyline in that book, every vignette in that book happened. I haven't made any of this up. I've given it to another character, one of my lead characters, but they all happened. And it's come from testimonies and biographies.
You sound like something's happened, someone said something to you that's made you question your intentions. When you're writing a book like that, you're obviously having to delve very deep into your soul to speak from the heart. You're not speaking by just writing like a Danielle Steele, but you're speaking from the heart, and the heart is dictating what you need to be writing. Has someone said to you, Heather, that what you're doing isn't right?
No, not really. Only my own internal voice.
And why is
Yeah,
that?
when I'm writing it and I'm talking about one of the characters and what's happened to her, but I know it actually happened to one of the other characters who I'm not giving that credit for having not only endured or suffered mostly bad things, but she has had the courage to write them down herself in her own testimony. But there's nowhere else in the book to put it. So it's me that's giving myself a hard time over this one.
Well, can I
So,
just tell you that in radio, for example, or podcast, what's edited out, the audience doesn't know, okay? And we're giving that glimmer of just here's a shortened version that's edited in a way that's
yeah,
digestible, that's not going to be books and books and books. You're not writing an encyclopedia. What you've done in Sisters Under the Rising Sun is you've given a little bit of going, here's some information, just digest this. If you want to find out more, you can go and research things. You
yeah,
can go to Australia, etc., etc. You shouldn't feel guilty about it because there is only so much you can do. You've obviously, at the back of your book, you've written other people's names in there, but
yes.
you had a responsibility that you created yourself to just tell a version of the story, to just get people to understand what happened to an Australian nurse or the Australian nurses on behalf of someone. So I don't want you to feel any guilt. And it really hurts me that you feel guilt because I look up to you so much on what you're doing for the educational side through the book. And I
Thank
don't like that that's the way you're coming to terms with it now that it's out for print.
Look, thank you. Perhaps I needed that belt around the head from somebody. So thank you. I'll take it. Yeah, for me, the important thing has always got to be that the story is being told. And why it had to be told or should have been told a long, long time ago was because of the treatment of these women when they got home. How they were told to go away, not speak about it, forget it ever happened. Now that happens on a lot of things. But with the British women were concerned, the people of the times, the government of the day, they went one step further. When they were on that boat coming from Singapore back to Southampton, a troop carrier, and there were a couple of thousand troops, men who had been imprisoned on Changi and other men's Japanese prisoner of war camps, that they were told to stay below deck when the boat docked, that their family members were told not to come to the dock because the men were to be given a hero's welcome home. Men who had survived imprisonment, just like they had, were to be welcomed home, and they weren't. And in anyone's language, that's wrong. And I will not accept being told time and place.
And as a female, looking at females who were in the war, how do you respond to that as an author when you're writing a book like this, to go, morally, and the way that I think as a lady and as a feminist, that this is wrong, that women have been kind of disregarded from the history of these people who have come forward on the other side of the war?
Well, by getting the story out, it's not too late. It will never be too late for somebody involved in either the military here or the government here to say, we made a mistake. We were wrong. We should not have done that. It's not them. The sins of the father you do not, for me, put on to the people, the children. Well, for the government of the day here to be able to acknowledge that back then this was a terrible, terrible mistake. Nothing's going to happen to them by doing that. But these women and their families and the greater population here will know, okay, that's what happened. And yeah, it was wrong. And now can we just honor these women? It just has to be a fleeting thing, but something. Unfortunately, I don't have any ins with any polys here. So if there's anybody watching this who does and can just raise that question, can we acknowledge them? Look, it was the Australian nurses, pretty much. They got a welcome home. So they differed there, but it was very fleeting. The boat came into Perth. The Premier of the state came on board, gave them all a bunch of flowers. The people of Perth turned out in their thousands and thousands and welcomed them home. And then the next day, they were said, now go home to your own states and forget it ever happened. Put it behind you. And they were then never heard of again. Meanwhile, the men are coming back from both the Asia-Pacific region and from Europe, prisoners of war and soldiers, and they're marching down the street and being welcomed home. It just, as a female living today, it rankles. And the only good thing I know is that on the 25th of April every year, when we have Anzac Day, that is our day in Australia and New Zealand for remembering the men and the women of the war. And it's really interesting. We have now different coloured poppies, and we remember the men, and of course we should. And then we have a different colour poppy to remember the horses. And we have a different colour poppy to remember the dogs. We don't have anything to remember the women. What does that tell you?
There's a story, an anecdote about the Bible, and how there were the nurses who were told to entertain the captains and the soldiers. And they said, look, we don't want to do it. If we do it, we've got to swear on the Bible that this will never be spoken about again. And it got me thinking about, after you've written 3 big books, that you've delved so much into these people's journeys and really lived through these characters' lives for the moment that you're writing a book. Again, I hope this all makes sense, that I know that we're talking about the Holocaust, but in the context of your books only. I'm not talking about the Holocaust, So how do you look at religion now? And how do you look at what the Bible stands for when you've seen so much, you've heard so much, and then even now that we're talking about a gender divide even happening?
Johnny, I've never had a religious upbringing per se. That's not quite true, actually. I used to go to Sunday school in the little town I grew up in. My parents didn't care which Sunday school I went to me, well, which one of my friends is going. And it was a little town that had a church on 4 corners. And so I'd go one day to the Catholic, the next day to the Presbyterian, then, I'll go to the Methodist this week. And that was just a matter of who I could play with afterwards. And so I had that Sunday school upbringing. For me, I defer to anyone and everyone who are spiritual and for whom a God and the Bible or the Quran or whatever it is that it brings meaning and significance to their life, that's fine. It's not been part of my life. But when I was reading about the nurses swearing on the Bible, and I found many accounts of that, what they were swearing on that Bible for was actually not to reveal the name of the 4 women who sacrificed themselves so that the other women in the camp and the children in that camp could eat. They called it comfort women. It wasn't comfort women. They were being turned into unpaid prostitutes. Now, the thing about that, and which is going to play out in Australia, I know it's going to, is that not only were those nurses told when they got back to deny there was any sexual abuse, every single one of these testimonies, these women, they see the question, they were pointedly asked, were you sexually abused? And they answer, no, none of us were, because that was the line they were told. Now, we've dug deeper as to why they played it out that way. And it turns out that the government of the day thought that, A, it would shame the women if it became common knowledge, but also the very fear, the anti-Japanese sentiment, which still was pervading Australia at the time. Well, in the words of one of the colonels I think we read, said World War III would break out if the men of Australia knew that their woman had been raped. And so they covered it up. They even covered it up to the extent that when Nesta, along with one of the other nurses, Vivian Bullwinkle, went to Japan in 1946 and gave evidence at the war trials of the 2 of the Japanese officers who were being tried, who were in the camp, they had to swear in a Bible that it didn't happen. And they did that. They held the line. Now, it wasn't until Vivian, who wrote her own memoir, but once again, as she was an older woman, she revealed that she had to co-write that along with a person, an officer given to her by the Australian Army, who oversaw every word that was written and withheld her and stopped her from writing the truth. But as an older woman, not long before she passed, she revealed it. And one other woman, an elderly woman in a nursing home, she revealed it. But again, they acknowledged that it happened. And even this woman in this nursing home with dementia could not be brought to say the names of the 4 because they had all sworn on a Bible not to do that. And so in terms of the Bible and its significance to them, I bow down to them. It held the power for them to carry out their entire lives with that vow, the significance being made on that Bible. You know, I'm glad we don't know the names of those 4. I know the names of every one of those nurses. They're ingrained in my head. I don't want to know who those 4 were.
Well, with those names in your head, along with Lale, Gita, Silka, Magda, Livy, you've been through all their journeys through your book. So bringing your 3 books together and that in your memory, what is your brain saying now when you're thinking of those people, those atrocious stories that you've heard, the horrific things they've been through? When you're going back about your day-to-day life and then it just kind of somebody comes to you or people refer to them to you because it's Heather Morris, the author of the book about that person. These are real people, and a lot of the people that you either personally knew or you've delved into their stories, so it's as if you know them or you've met their relations. How do you generally, as Heather Morris, go about your day-to-day life with all these thoughts in your head always?
You know, when I think of any one of those people, I actually smile. I get strength from who they were, what they suffered, and how they did not, in the majority of the cases, well, all the ones I know, how they did not let what happened to them define who they then went on to become and what they did with the rest of their lives. Look, I know, and I'm not naive, and I've met the many, many survivors, particularly of the Holocaust, for whom how they suffered and what they endured did not permit them to have a good life. Quite the opposite. And their children and their grandchildren, generations, suffered as a result of that trauma. But for the ones who I know intimately now, and I can say that about them, I get nothing but strength from them. And they do nothing but bring a smile to my face.
Talking of that strength, your book, The Tattooist of Auschwitz, is being turned into a film. It's in post-production now. What's your involvement with it?
My fancy title was script consultant. I had to bow down and acknowledge that any skills I had in writing a screenplay were this much compared to the expertise and the brilliance of a proper screenwriter. But they sent me the scripts as they were being written, and I kind of went, oh, wow, brilliant, wow. No, no, no. no, back to the drawing board on that one. And so I had that amount of involvement with it. The scripts getting up to the point of going into development. And I'm so chuffed that the makers of the miniseries invited me to Slovakia in February as they were about to begin shooting, and that I was there for that week. And on the very first day, before the very first time the director called roll camera, I was given the chance to speak to the cast and crew that were there that day and thank them for what they were about to undergo and do on Lali and Gita's behalf and everyone's behalf, because I knew it was going to be a harrowing journey for them, and it was. And so, yes, I got to see a lot of this being filmed in February in the cold of Bratislava. And then I returned in May when they were shooting the scenes with Melanie and Harvey. So I then got to see these other two incredible actors as they undertook the roles of old Lali and me.
So then you take a step back, and on those aeroplane flights, when you'd seen it in action, how did it make you look at the journey that you've been on over the past 8-10 years of getting to know Lale, writing out his story, that story going out there, selling 12 million copies, then writing 3 books and going, not only is this the work that I've done and the responsibilities that I've taken, but also this is doing him the justice that he deserves of getting his voice out there now.
Yeah, it bookends it, doesn't it? It started that way and now it's ending that way. And he would be so chuffed. He was besotted by the fact that he was a good-looking boy, and he told me that many, many times. You know, I'm a good-looking boy. You find me a good-looking boy to play me. And he wanted Brad Pitt and he wanted Ryan Gosling and all these other actors. Well, we found in Jonah Hauer-King and in Harvey Keitel the perfect lollies. And I know that he would be over the moon. I know that he's up there with Gita, dancing around the room because he loved to dance. And so, again, it brings a smile to my face that I've been able to do that for him, because that's how he thought it was going to exist on a screen, big or small.
Well, Heather, your book, Sisters Under the Rising Sun, is out to go and buy now. Your other books, starting with The Tattooist of Auschwitz, onto Silke's journey. Silke was Gita's best friend in Auschwitz, and then The Three Sisters are out to buy now, as well as your memoir about your journey to writing that Tattooist of Auschwitz. A great read as well, is out to buy now. Your favourite song, 100 Days Rise Up, is out to listen to now, because I always listen to that after every time I speak to you. The one thing I just want to say as well is, I hope in this interview you don't think I've glamorized the Holocaust, I've glamorized anything. This is very much about Heather's journey, Heather's books, and we're focusing on the book. We're focusing on the film, not what actually happened. But I want to give it context, and I just really hope, and I just want to reiterate, I really hope I haven't offended anyone with this interview, and that I've done Heather justice, I've done the Holocaust and the education justice, because that's what I want to do as a Jewish person, especially. It means a lot to me, and it meant a lot to me to read the book. And I just want to clarify and just reiterate that this isn't a glamorous interview. This isn't, this is showbiz and sexy. This is very much, let's hear people's journeys so that the Holocaust should never happen again. So my thanks to Heather Morris for that. If you like books and you want to be part of the Security and Secure Book Club, every couple of weeks I interview another author about the mental health things in their books. There's episodes of Amanda Prowse, Nicola Gill, Adele Parks, Claire McIntosh, Jane Fallon, Tim Weaver, Annabelle Knight, and many, many more. Go and check them out in the library. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star rating, click that follow, subscribe button, and share it with your friends. And let's keep spreading the word. It's okay to not be okay. We know through the generations that phrase has never been more so important. It's okay to not be okay. On TikTok at Johnny Seifert 92, on Instagram at Johnny Seifert, that's Security and Secure Podcast, and on Twitter at Johnny Seifert. So do go and check me out. I'm Johnny Seifert. Thank you so much for watching or listening. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.